What does it mean to help someone and then make them the story? Scott-Gardner has been thinking about that question. He's a blind accessibility advocate and disability rights writer. And in this conversation, he takes on something that most people in the access space are still too polite to name directly: the difference between serving someone and platforming yourself through them. He talks about Be My Eyes. He talks about consent. He talks about a viral video he made years ago that still sits uncomfortably with him, even though he was the one holding the camera, even though he was saying a compliment, even though he was legally in the clear. He also talks about audio description, where it's been, where it's going, and what it means that blind audiences are finally being asked what they actually want, rather than being handed what the industry assumed they needed. And I think there's a way to weave all these stories together. This is part 2 of our conversation. If you haven't heard part 1, you can go back. But this half, it stands on its own. I think you'll appreciate your full attention here. Connor's earned it. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, please like, subscribe, and give a positive rating. And be sure to share it with other friends. As always, this is for Kevin. I'd love to shift to something that you have some very clear and important opinions to share. When sighted people document their interactions with blind people publicly, you had a very specific post recently about some social media videos that had gone out about the ways that sighted people were almost platforming themselves in the service of what they were doing. Would you feel comfortable talking with our audience about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So the context for that was an app called Be My Eyes. And Be My Eyes is essentially an app where you can sign up either as a blind person or as a sighted person. And if you sign up as a blind person, you're signing up and saying, hey, I might need help sometimes. And if you're signing up as a sighted person, you're saying, I'm happy to volunteer and give that help. And I think it's a great concept. And I think it has amazing benefits for both communities, actually, because I think there are lots of blind people who need the support, blind people who don't have access to various services, blind people who aren't confident using different kinds of technology. And also, there are plenty of sighted people who want to make a difference within their community, but maybe they can't leave the house, for example, or they have a really busy schedule and can't commit to regular volunteering, but they think, you know what, I want to do something. And I don't ever want to discourage volunteering and giving back, because I think actually probably now more than ever in our society, we really need that. It's something that we don't want to kind of discourage. We want to build a positive society. What concerned me, though, was a small minority of those volunteers had recorded their interactions with the blind people and then posted them on primarily TikTok. And so these videos were, to be fair to Be My Eyes, often filmed on a second phone. So even if Be My Eyes had disabled screen recording in the app, if the person grabs a second phone, they can film their phone screen, with that second device. And so what was happening is you would see the sighted person with their phone, but sometimes you would also see the image on their screen, which was of a blind person. And so what really concerned me about this was this imbalance of power. So a blind person is asking for help. They're in kind of a vulnerable position because they're saying, hey, I need help with something. Maybe that thing is kind of embarrassing. Maybe you wouldn't want your friends to know you needed help with this certain thing. There's a sense of pride, right? And that interaction, without their knowledge, is being captured and shared online. That really bothered me because I felt that it was wrong. But I also wasn't necessarily saying Be My Eyes are bad or you shouldn't use Be My Eyes. What I think is really important is we're living at a time where the way we use technology is changing so quickly. If we look at the last 10 or 15 years, the things we do with technology have changed so much. And so for me, it's about being vigilant. It's about being educated. And if you know that there is a chance, no matter how small, that your interaction might be recorded and put online, how does that change how you use the app? And you might think, actually, it doesn't really, I don't care. The things I ask for assistance doing aren't things I care if anyone else sees or whatever. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine for that to be your response. But I think for a lot of people, they hadn't even realized that it might even happen. And so it's just about having that knowledge that this thing has happened and it's unlikely, but it might happen. And that was why I posted about it, because I felt like actually what we need to do as a community is be really open about these things. It's not to spread fear, and it's not to say, oh, you should be scared, don't do this, don't do that. It's just to say, hey, this is a risk of being on the internet. It's like if you text your friend something and you're like, oh, I really hate this mutual friend of ours. Like, what? There is a risk that your friend will screenshot that, right? And that message
Mm.
might get back to the person you've spoken about, because that is a risk of using technology. But lots of people do that. But it's just about being aware of how technology can be used.
Oh, what a beautiful answer. And I'm tracking the element of consent,
Mm, mm,
and how in those situations that second device recording something that
yeah,
was not consented to. I think about the trust breaking that happens when
yeah.
something private is made public.
Mm,
This is, yeah, like you said, this isn't a technology issue. This has to do with character and understanding this private exchange. And I can only help think back to earlier in our conversation talking about relationship
mm.
that it seems to track. Can we make a bridge there?
Yeah, I think it's about that mutual respect, right? And the give and take. I think that a very small minority of volunteers sort of felt like I'm doing this really good thing, therefore I am entitled to this entire interaction, right? And you can't criticize me for posting this online because I did a very good thing. It's also like there are loads of videos of people who go up to homeless people, for example, and film themselves giving homeless people food. And it's like, I'm not saying you shouldn't give homeless people food, right? That's probably objectively a good thing to do. But those interactions don't feel very genuine unless you get that person's consent and you say, actually, all the money I make off my videos goes into buying food. Can I talk to you about why this is helpful or
Yeah,
whatever, right? And
yeah,
some people do that and they have those meaningful interactions, and that's fine. Other people feel what they perceive as good deeds, but it feels very disingenuous. It feels really like they're doing it for kind of social clout. And I've even thought about it. So I make TikTok videos sometimes, not very frequently these days, but I made a video a couple of years ago that went viral and it had millions of views. And it was me getting on a bus, and I asked the bus driver for some assistance, and they gave me the information I needed. And basically, my video was saying, hey, this is really great that this bus driver did this, and I would love to see more of this. But once the video got loads and loads of views, I started to think I actually felt really uncomfortable because that guy was just doing his job, and I essentially filmed him at work. And whilst what I was saying was a compliment, he gave me really great assistance, and I was in a public place. I legally was allowed to film him. I wasn't breaking any terms and conditions in the way that the volunteers on Be My Eyes are violating Be My Eyes terms, but it still felt somehow wrong to me that I had filmed a guy just doing his job, and maybe he would have felt really positive about that video, but maybe he wouldn't. And I didn't really give him the choice to feel
mm,
either way.
yeah,
And it was very different to me to like, you're walking down the street and someone happens to walk past you and is caught in your video, but they're not the subject of your video, because we have to accept that people do film in public these days. That is just the reality of it. But when you're making them the subject of a video, I don't know, it really changed my view on things.
wow, what an experience. Yeah, and I see that nuance that you share with it, the difference between education and
Mm,
I don't know. I kind of want to say extraction, but
yeah.
there's something that feels very unconsensual about it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people kind of lean on their intent and say, well, I am doing this for awareness, or I'm doing this for this. And it's like, yeah, that may be true. And I've never doubted that, actually. I think probably a lot of the people who film think they're doing a good thing. But sometimes we do something with good intentions, but that doesn't, in the end, mean that it didn't kind of violate someone's trust in some way.
Yeah. I'm so glad we covered this. Thank you, Connor. We've covered a lot. For
Mm,
our audience, it's specifically for audio description professionals, but I've really enjoyed
yeah.
expanding beyond that. Is there anything that you'd love to share with our audience that we haven't covered yet? Something in your experience that's uniquely yours, or something that we'd really appreciate hearing, something that you'd love for us to know?
Hmm. I mean, I guess like specifically in audio description context, I have a really, I guess, interesting relationship with audio description that I am now a huge fan of it and a real advocate for audio description. I wasn't always as a child. I kind of was like, ugh, I don't want this.
Hmm.
And I think that's a very typical experience for some young blind people. There's kind of this awkwardness about needing something different or that is perceived as different.
Sure.
And I mean, it was also really hard to get audio described content then. It existed, but it was very much like, oh, I think I had two videotapes, like VHS cassettes that were audio described films as a child, which kind of, what a throwback. But, it was much harder to access as well. So I think
Hmm.
it felt more inconvenient in a way it just doesn't now. I think for audio description, what I've really noticed is a real collaboration between blind people and the industry in a way that maybe didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. And that might just be my perspective because I'm much more involved in the community now. But I've definitely seen real conversations between, okay, what do blind people want from audio description? And things have changed. I was talking to someone the other day about describing race in audio description because actually they mentioned someone's visual appearance to me. We were at an event and they kind of gave me some context for something. And they said, actually, as a sighted person describing, they're never sure whether to describe physical characteristics that might relate to race, like the color of someone's skin or something like that. And we were talking about how that's something that's really changed in audio description. I think sort of 15, 20 years ago, actually, if race was mentioned, it would only be mentioned if someone was not white. Now, I think race is mentioned or skin color is mentioned much more often. And actually, for white people as well, someone will be introduced as a white man or a young white girl or whatever the situation is. And I think that's born out of conversations with blind people, but also the wider movement that's happened in kind of social justice movements as well. So I think that's, for me, observing the changes has been really interesting. And also the kinds of formats that are audio described. So in the UK, we have a very significant live audio described community and in our theatres. So you can, and I think it's true in the US. I think the US is just a lot bigger and there are a lot more local theatres. Obviously you've got Broadway in New York, but kind of the UK, you could have kind of one or two companies that describe all the live theatre and they can travel around the UK. That's maybe more challenging in the US and bigger countries. But what I've really observed over the last few years again is pushing the boundaries of what can be described. Like I've been to audio described ballets, for example. And I think when I was growing up, ballet was not something that would have been audio described. It was kind of like, well, you can't see the dance, so you don't go to the ballet. Whereas now it's very much actually how do we describe ballet? And it's so fast moving. What do you need to say to convey what is happening on stage and to narrate that story in a way that can be accessed by a blind person? And so that's been really interesting for me, that kind of pushing the boundaries of what can we describe and how do we describe it, and that kind of work between describers and the community.
Oh, beautiful. I love it. What great specific examples too, with the identity of the physicality and also
Mm.
the live, specifically with ballet. I
Yeah.
can only imagine the when that is in the pocket, when that's in that perfect space. It must be
Mm.
incredibly satisfying for everyone, both the
Hmm.
for all the audiences. Connor, how can we follow you? Social media. What's your preference? Your favorites?
I have a Facebook page, which if you search for Connor Scott-Gardner, you'll find it's under Connor Scott-Gardner Accessibility and Disability Rights. I do have an Instagram account at Connor Scott-Gardner. I would say it is in use. I just don't post it all the time. I have TikTok as well, which is at Connor Scott-Gardner, and you can also search for me on YouTube. My video content and kind of photo content at the moment is slightly less. I tend to go through waves where I'll create a lot and then because video and images are just so much more intense for me to create.
Hmm.
I kind of burn out all my energy and then I'm like, okay, I need a reset. But I
Sure.
always write. So you can find my writing on Facebook mostly. And I do have a blog as well, which is catchthesewords.com.
Catchthesewords.com. Great. Oh, thanks so much, Connor. It's such a pleasure to have you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.